Okie dokie, we successfully completed our first mini project, the book mini project. But why don't we look at how we can work with CSS in React? Because maybe we would want to add a little bit more styling. Whereas I'm going to the bigger screen, let's say it will gonna have the layout like the Amazon does, at least the layout. I mean, it's not gonna look exactly the same because we're not gonna spend that much time on CSS. In fact, quite frankly, it's still going to look hideous, but at least we're going to have the attempt of how to work with CSS in React and how everything is going to look all together. Okay, so where do we start? I think first we would need to head over back to the CSS files. Now, this is going to be my Git that I'm not interested, so let me head over to the files. And remember, previously I said whenever you want to add something in React, the easiest thing, the fastest thing would be working either with index CSS or with app CSS. So why don't we test it out? I'm gonna head over back to the CSS, and I hope that you're familiar with CSS where, let's say if I'm gonna be adding something to the body, that's gonna be affected my whole document. So here I'm gonna say like this. I'm gonna say that I would want the background to be light gray. And for this, I'm just gonna use a hex value. So E5, E5, and then E5. And the moment I save it, nothing happens. So you might be wondering, you probably made some kind of mistake, and that's not how you do it. There has to be some other way. In fact, everything is correct. However, we have not included anything here right now. Because remember, we recreated the whole component ourselves. So in this case, what we would need to do is we would need to import again the CSS. However, this is not a dependency that we installed with NPM. In this case, we would need to show the relative path. And by the way, this is going to work exactly the same as with working with a JavaScript components when we're going to be creating separate files. However, the case is that with CSS, we need to have the full extension. So in our case, that would be index. And since this is CSS, not a JavaScript one, we need to write CSS. For JavaScript, we're going to be able to omit this, where we're going to write just import. So get me this file. And we can just say whatever the file name is without the JSX or JS extension. But with everything else, we're going to have this file extension, CSS or the images and so on and so forth. Relative path means that if this is going to be in this folder, then we're just going to have dot and forward slash. We will going to cover this a little bit later on as we're working with imports and exports in general. So in that lecture, we're going to cover when we would use two dots, when we would just use one dot. But for now, only thing we're looking for is this one dot. And the moment we're going to save it, then we're going to have our background. Okay, maybe it's kind of hard to see. And by the way, no, it's a little bit better probably to see because it just refreshed. But why don't we head over back here and let's say red? Otherwise, you probably definitely think that, you know what, he doesn't know what he's talking about. So let me change this. Now this should rule be applied. So once we're going to save it to red, obviously my background is going to be red. And just to show you that it is working, again, I'm going to comment this out, and this is going to be light gray. Okay. In the CSS, what options do we have for styling? I believe one of the most major ones that we always use is classes. So why don't we do this? Why don't I add here class name? Because remember, we couldn't use the class. That was the actual reserved keyword in EF6. And let's write that the name is going to be books. So this is going to be for this component, for the whole section that's holding the books. And then I'll have the book, which is going to have a separate one of class name of the book. Please don't focus on the CSS. Let's say if you don't know the CSS we're going to be writing, don't lose your mind over it. It's fine. It's just some simple CSS that you're going to use. And you can do maybe a little bit more research if you don't know what's happening. But in general, if I would be you, I wouldn't lose your sleep over it. As long as you understand the actual React, you should be fine. So let's say what I would want for the books. Well, my idea would be like this. The moment we get to some bigger screen, I would want to have a 3-column layout. And in order to do this, I'm going to use the media query. I'm going to say media screen. That would be the syntax. Then I'm going to be looking for the name and then we're going to say starting from what screen. So let's say min width. So starting from min width of 768 pixels, I would like to have a 3-column layout. Now, in order to do that, I will going to select the class, and that is important. I added in the index.js the class name of books. I'm obviously targeting the same thing in CSS. So I'm going to say books, and for the books, so for the whole section, I would want that section to be display grid once it gets to 768. And then we're going to say grid template columns. And again, this is where I'm saying don't focus on these properties right now in the CSS one. If you haven't covered grid, that's fine. Only thing this is doing is it's setting up what kind of column layouts. And then in our case, we're just going to use the fraction values. This has nothing to do with React. We're saying that there's going to be 3 equally sized columns. And yes, by the way, if you're familiar with syntax, I know we could have written repeat, the repeat function, but I'm not going to do this right now since, again, this is a React course. And then let's add another property, grid gap, which is going to be, in our case, let's say 20 pixels. So let me save it. And I should have right now my 3-column layout. Awesome. So it is getting a little bit closer where we had in Amazon. Thankful. I'm very thankful for that. Okay. I'm not going to deal with any more media screens. I don't really care about it. This is just going to be for the grid. But what I would want for the book. And for the book class, remember, we added this to this book component. So this is going to be affected not regarding the screen size, but in general, this is going to be affected for each and every book that we're going to be displaying. And what I would want. Well, first of all, let's add a box sizing of border box, just because I wouldn't want to add paddings and margins, and then the actual component will gonna get bigger. So in this case, I'm gonna say border box. And then we're gonna add a little bit of padding all around. So we're gonna say 20 pixels. As you can see, it gets a little bit better, but there's an issue. Right now, I'm not targeting the book. So let me head over back and let's see what is the problem. So I have the book, but I have the syntax error because this is not a class name. This is class num. And here I would need to add the class name, and now everything is going to be working fine. Okay, so far so good. Then also let's add some margin. Let's say margin is going to be 20 pixels, again, all around. That's going to be my margin, as well as we can change, obviously, the background a little bit. Let's say hex color, FFF, what would mean white, as well as we can add maybe border. So border 1 pixel, pixel solid. And then we're going to be looking for the black. And then we can just say here, yes, that's going to be my border, as well as border radius. It's going to be very simply, let's say something like 5 pixels. And that would be as far as we are working with the classes. We also can target, obviously, the elements by ourselves. And if we remember, we had for the title heading 1. So the same way I can say, you know what, for all the heading 1s that I'm going to have, which is going to be kind of brutal, but anyway, let's imagine this. Color is going to be blue. What happens? Surprise, surprise, all our heading 1s are going to turn blue. How this is going to work in a bigger screen? This is going to look exactly like this. We're not limited, though, just adding the styles in a CSS. We can also do a styles, whether they're non-styles, as well as setting up our separate variables for styles. So how this is going to work? So far, we know the classes. We know if I want to add class, I just add the class and then style class. Our inline style would work like this. So we have the style attribute in the HTML. However, the difference is that from the HTML, we would do something like this. We would add our quotation marks. Now in a JSX, we write 2, and then these are going to be curly brackets. Now within the curly brackets, what we can do? Well, we can write whatever styles. In our case, what I would be looking for? Well, let's say here we would be looking for the font size. So font size for this heading 1 would be bigger. Just remember, you are writing here the JavaScript. This is the reason why it gives you these capital case letters. So we have font size, and this would be capitalized. And the reason for that, and again, we're writing this camel case, by the way, as well. And the reason for that would be the simple fact that this is JavaScript. This is not CSS. So also the syntax would be a little bit different, where we are passing the value in a string. Now, that is not the case in the normal CSS. Obviously, we just have the property and the value. However, since this is JavaScript, we need to write it in the quotation marks. So in this case, I'm going to say the font size is going to be 2 REMs. And also just to show you that obviously with the inline, we can change or overwrite the styles. I'm just going to say that the color is going to be red. And what happens? Well, all my heading 1s, instead of having the blue color that I set in CSS, I can use the inline style here. And font size would be, let's say, 2 REMs and color red. Granted, as you're looking at this, you can see that your JavaScript, your actual JSX, gets more and more clogged. So I don't know how really frantic you're going to be about doing the inline styles, but I do want to show you that that is one of the options that you can use. Okay, what else we have? I think we can work with the variable just to show you how we can store everything here in the variable and then apply it if that's something you would want. And for this, I'm going to use the paragraph. So instead, what I'm going to do here, I'm going to say the name would be something like author style, and I can name this whatever I would like. I'm just choosing this to be something familiar because I'm already using the author anyway. And here I'm going to create an object. And again, since we know that this is an object, we are working again with JavaScript, obviously. So I'm going to say letter spacing. And in this case, we're going to be looking for, I don't know, 10 pixels. So that would be just a normal object syntax that we had, where we have the property and then we have the value, as well as we would want the color to be green. So I'm going to be passing here the color of green. Instead of writing everything here within our style attribute, what I can do is I can just say, okay, there's still going to be style attribute. However, the value is going to be the author, and then we're looking for the style. Since obviously this is the name of the variable. And what happens? Well, my style is being applied for my paragraph. So those would be the basic ways how we can add CSS to our React application. Yes, there is more options to it. We will later on look at Sass. We'll look at styled components. We'll look at Bootstrap and all that. However, basic way how to get up and running with CSS would be following. So we will gonna have to import the CSS if you want to use the style sheet. That is something really important. Then we can apply the styles in the style sheet just like with regular CSS. Or if we want to go this route, we can always do the inline styles.